Grayson Grundhoefer, 365 recruiting sports analyst, co-host of the Bearcast. Grayson, I read your opening line today, where I am at for today. This is a very ominous type of start to the column. Baylor has to regain some momentum on the trail over the course of the next few days because things have stalled since the official visits ended. If they don't go well, the expectations for this class go down the drain, which means the only cure would be winning on the field. That's truth serum right there. I agree with you, but I'm not as deep into the recruiting as you are. Has it been stunning that they haven't gained more momentum?
I don't think I would say it's stunning. I think this was expected that it might take some time for things to, kind of happen, because a lot of guys had their official visits lined up and had their dates lined up. But I would say that, they got to find a way to win a bunch of these battles. Because if they don't, if they, lose battles, if they continue to kind of, stay status quo, then, you're going to run into some issues, because there's big battles in front of them, and there's battles they really need to win. And they're battles that are very much up in the air still. So it's really more about that, because this staff has done such a good job of capitalizing on official visits in the past. They have to do it again. They got to find a way to win these battles when they got guys on campus, especially the guys who they've made priorities. So it is a big deal. It is a big week, a little over a week, I would say, and a big opportunity for Baylor to make a big jump here. But yeah, right now, things have been pretty stalled since the commitment of Leo Almanza, which is fine. Again, that's fine. But you got to regain momentum, and it kind of has to start with just one stone turn, right? Just one big thing happens, it can kind of snowball into multiple other things.
Grayson, what do you think? Is there a prospect out there that would, pull the plug out of the dam for them, so to speak?
That's a good question, because I think you could answer that a number of ways, just because there's so many, high priority targets for them. I would say that, kind of the ones that have dates set are probably the ones that are easier to kind of point out. Because when you look at a guy like, for instance, Lorena defensive lineman Jackson Blackwell, I think he's going to make his decision on Monday, or at least sometime early next week. I think right now it's a head-to-head battle between Baylor and Texas Tech. And, to lose a kid who grew up a Baylor fan, who, lives, 15 minutes from Baylor, that would be a tough one to lose, especially at a position where we've seen nose tackle has been a real problem for Baylor over the years. To get a guy like him would really solidify things, I think, for them up front. So he's definitely one that I think would give Baylor fans a lot of optimism and also start some momentum. Also on Monday, Cy-Fall linebacker Caleb Burns is also making his decision. And he's got a top three of Baylor, SMU, and Texas Tech, but I think it's going to be Baylor versus Texas Tech as well. I think he's pretty much come down to those two. And there is a lot of smoke on Texas Tech's side right now. And so that's going to be really interesting. He's been a top priority for them at linebacker. He and Trent Spence were kind of the ideal linebacker core for Baylor in this class. They've made him a priority, and they got to find a way to finish the deal there. But those two definitely stand out just because we know those dates are coming up, and we know that they've been priorities for a really long time. And there's other guys that, I could point to, whether you look at Jalen Cooper, who's the steel wide receiver, Ja'Cory Watson out of Shadow Creek. These are all kind of guys who I think really could get the ball rolling for Baylor to start, regaining and recapturing some of the momentum they had at the beginning of June.
With all the conference movement and just kind of the changes over the past couple of years, have you seen recruiting just in terms of who they're competing with and kind of the teams that maybe give them the biggest bugaboo? Has that changed much in your opinion? And who are the teams, like you've been saying Texas Tech a lot. Is that the team that's kind of like the pest right now, I guess, when it comes to recruiting and landing some of the guys they'd want?
I wouldn't say that anything has really changed, just because, a lot of the guys, that we're talking about, they're coming down to, Baylor versus Texas Tech, or Baylor versus TCU, or Baylor versus Oklahoma State. Like, there are a lot of ones like that. I would say I do think there's a few more kind of random ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When you look at, for instance, Corey Watson, he's got Baylor and Houston in his top, three-ish, but he also has Boston College. And that's kind of a random one. If you look at, a Bryson Weber, he took visits to Utah, TCU, Nebraska, Kansas, Baylor, just kind of a big mixture there of schools. Michael Turner has Utah, Missouri, Arizona State. So again, kind of it just is a little bit different, right? A little bit different of some of the schools that you're hearing about, some of the schools that I suppose they're competing against. But, I don't know how much that has changed because of NIL or things like that, but I do think it really is a year-by-year basis and a case-by-case basis, to be honest. But I think in general, we pretty much know the schools that Baylor's going to be battling with, and it's pretty much Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU, and then the bigger schools like Texas and Texas A&M, a little bit of SMU here and there. And then I would say, the kind of risers in the Big 12, whether it's Utah or, a school like that could definitely kind of jump into the mix as well.
Arizona's getting into Texas pretty good here lately.
In fact, we had Brent Brennan on a week ago, and he absolutely said that they know they need to get into here. And they had before, but they need to get into here.
Yeah, I mean, they're recruiting Jackson Blackwell pretty hard. That's one where he took an official visit there. But outside of that, I've actually heard Arizona State more than Arizona, but that's just specifically talking about the Baylor prospect.
Grayson, you mentioned a lot of schools that are the ones that they're competing for prospects with. None of them that I can think of have a coach on the hot seat. Baylor, obviously, with Dave Randa, that has to be something people are using against them. Has that been brought up by many of those who you talked to who have visited Baylor or you've talked to that haven't yet?
It really hasn't been brought up by prospects specifically. I mean, that it's getting used to a certain extent on the trail. But, I mean, the thing of it is I think when you talk to any of these recruits, when you talk to any of the commits as well, there's a vision that I think they see at Baylor, and they see the changes Baylor made, and they see kind of this intensity and drive to improve. And I think you're seeing that from the Baylor staff. And I think because of that, recruits and commits specifically see that and have optimism in where Baylor is heading over the next year and forward with this same staff. I think most prospects, really do believe that. But it's absolutely getting used. And, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because Baylor just had a really tough season, and, you can utilize that in different ways if you're a different school. And, they're going to. But I think right now and in general, I think Baylor's done about as well as you can in just kind of calming those things and making sure that each prospect knows and sees the direction that Baylor's trying to go going forward, and really sees a plan in place to make that happen.
Grayson, NBA draft had Yves Missy go in the first round. Jacoby Walter goes first, actually, 19th. And then Yves Missy goes 21st. Missy to the Pelicans, Walter to the Raptors. I made note of this on Twitter the other day. 4 years in a row with a draft pick, that's a program record. 2 first-rounders in the same draft, that's a program record. And we could go on and on and on. But your thoughts on just the way they continue to build that NBA pipeline and where those guys landed, and just your thoughts on, the reaction to the draft itself. I know also Ray J. Dennis and Jalen Bridges also signing undrafted contracts as well.
I mean, the Baylor program is rolling right now when it comes to basketball. And I mean, they've been gaining this momentum for a while now. And obviously when you win the national championship, it really kind of opens up some doors for your program. And I think we've definitely seen that for Baylor. There's definitely a belief in what Scott Drew has at Baylor. And I think when you talk about, coaching stability and things like that, I think Baylor's in a great spot there, which is very appealing to transfers. And then obviously the one and done thing. And I know a lot of fans are kind of against the one and done to a certain extent, but it's important for the program. And when you're churning out draft picks like they are, that's a big deal. And it's really only a matter of time before you put together a roster that completely complements a one and done prospect to go win a potential national championship. I mean, we saw it with UConn this year. They had Stephen Castle, who went number 4 overall, and they did just fine winning a national championship with him starting because they had pieces around him to make that work. I think Baylor is, working on making that work as well. And I think going into next year, they got BJ Edgecombe, who's also going to be a lottery pick going into next year. And so they're going to continue this streak in my eyes. And it's something that's really important for the lifeblood of the program and really just shows, where they're at right now as a program that's continuing to rise and continuing to put guys in the NBA and continuing to excel in many, many phases.
Grayson, thank you very much. Thanks for jumping on a little bit later than normal with us on 365 Sports. Have a great weekend. Grayson Grundhoefer with us on this Friday afternoon, and his segment brought to you by Richard Carr, Buick GMC, Cadillac people you can count on Loop 340 just off of Imperial Drive in Waco. All right, it's 4:11. Much more to